As if having to listen to my own voice on YouTube wasn't torture enough the first time, I've decided to do it again. Yay! Speaking of torture, the fact that YouTube has been recommending me a lot of videos about that exact subject lately shows two things. One, I need therapy, and two, this seems to be a trending topic people are eager to know more about, so I might as well jump on the content bandwagon. This time around, I decided to see how it would turn out without any real animation, so this is more or less a glorified slideshow today. It might not look like it, but this can get time consuming and I don't want to have to spend months making one video if this is just a humble hobby for now. Quality over quantity, but I still have to balance quality with sanity. Although I'm not sure how much sanity I have left after reading about the things I'm going to mention today. I've sacrificed my eyes and stained my browser history for this, so let's get started. Ana Tsurushi, or whole hanging. This was a technique used by the Japanese in the 17th century when Christianity became outlawed in the country. If you were caught praying to the big daddy upstairs, you'd have two options: to renounce the religion or be subjected to this evil punishment. What would happen is that they would hang the victims upside down by the ankles in a dark hole and they'd tie one hand to his body but leave the other one free so he could signal when he was ready to change his beliefs. Now, as many people know, the ancient Japanese were very extra, so to make things even worse, before throwing the victim inside the hole, they would fill the bottom with fecal matter and make a cut in his forehead. The combination of the awful fumes and his decreasing blood pressure was supposed to push him to a breaking point even faster. If he agreed to apostatize, he would be let go, but if he didn't, then let's just say that whenever a Christian went into the hole, then one way or another a Christian wasn't coming out. Powena Kule, also known as penalty of the sack. This unusual style of execution was reserved for those who committed parricide, the act of killing your own parents, which was considered one of the worst crimes you could commit in ancient Rome. The murderer would be put into a leather sack which would then be sewn shut and cast into the ocean. The reason for using leather rather than linen was that it was easier to make watertight, meaning that death would be more likely to occur from suffocation instead of drowning. Yikes. Yep. They wanted to make sure that the last horrible moments of someone who killed their parents wouldn't end so quickly. But you might be thinking that sounds like a lonely way to die, and the Romans might have thought the same thing because sometimes they were nice enough to add a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster into the sack to keep you company. Why these animals in particular, I have no idea. But at least you could all get to know each other better while you slowly suffocated to death on your way to Bikini Bottom. If the warning at the beginning of this video applies to you but you decided to ignore it like a big dum-dum because you were curious, now's your chance to leave. This next one isn't for y'all with weak stomachs. That might be an ironic choice of words considering that I'm referring to the Swedish drink. And no, I'm not talking about a nice bottle of Trocadero. Oh no, I mean something far more sinister. You see, from 1618 to 1648, Europe experienced the aptly named 30 Years' War. During this time, the Swedes came up with a rather distasteful way of punishing any Germans they captured. They called it the Swedish drink and it was a concoction so bad it tasted like shit. Yeah, because it was literally shit. Piping hot liquefied shit mixed with piss to be forced down the throats of victims who refused to give up their possessions. They were fed this mixture until their stomachs were too full to take another drop. And assuming you thought it ended there, you assumed wrong. The torturers would proceed to squeeze the bloated belly till the victim threw up the entire meal. Then they'd be made to swallow a second helping. Either that or they'd just be popped open like a piñata with sticks and sometimes spears. Just like with the last entry, if you heard this name out of context, you might not immediately associate it with a disgusting act of violence. But hey, you've seen the title, so you don't need me to tell you it's another execution method. One that's definitely had its fair share of sparking controversy, We're going to Africa for this one, South Africa specifically, where the term necklace was first coined in the 1980s. This precarious fate was dished out by the black community to any of its members that were suspected of being informants for the apartheid government, usually without a trial beforehand. After dousing a rubber tie in petrol, it was forced around the suspected spy's body like a really big necklace and set alight. The crowd would watch while he choked on the smoke and the flames melted the tie into his skin, with the fire only stopping when it's left behind a corpse charred beyond recognition. Truly not a fun way to go. Although its use declined, this is sadly something that still goes on till today, even in some other African countries, though it's mostly in rural areas where it's now used on thieves and rapists. A variation of necklacing exists in Brazil, where it's carried out by the local drug dealers who burn their enemies in a whole stack of tires and call this death trap micro-ondas, meaning microwave in Portuguese. Derby's dose. This one wasn't done by angry black people trying to fight for freedom, rather it was done to black people by a white slave overseer in Jamaica called Thomas Thistlewood. As one can imagine, he was brutal towards his slaves who rarely got any meals and were severely malnourished and overworked. The few who were brave enough to attempt running away or stealing food to fill their empty bellies had to pray they wouldn't get caught because they knew that Derby's dose was one of the possible outcomes they'd have to endure. And it's said to have been named after the first slave it was used on, Derby himself. After being caught stealing sugar cane, he was beaten up and had a combination of salt pickle, lime, and bell pepper poured onto his open wounds. Then Thistlewood went even further with this inhumanity by making another slave empty his bowels into Derby's mouth, and this became a popular penalty on his plantations. In later cases, he would put a gag on the victim's mouth after having it filled with poop, and they'd be left to suffer like that for hours and hours on end. This was just one of the many atrocities Thistlewood detailed in his 14,000-page diary, in which he also talks about how he committed an act that rhymes with grape at least 3,582 times to 138 enslaved women, some of whom were underage. So you know what? I take back every mean thing I said about you, Greg Heffley. Maybe you're not the most sociopathic guy with a diary out there after all. Chinese water torture. This is the only punishment on the list that's technically classified as psychological, but as someone who spent months of their life on free-to-play mobile games, I can say from first-hand experience that psychological pain can be just as traumatizing as physical pain. I'm looking at you, Garena Free Fire. Anyway, Chinese water torture starts with placing a poor sucker in a chair, making sure to restrain his legs, arms, and head to prevent him from moving around. As he tries to think happy thoughts, a tap begins to drip cold water onto his head continuously. Drip, 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 for hours or even days. This might not sound so scary at first, but it's been known to induce psychosis in people who get subjected to this for long periods of time, especially when the water is set to drop at irregular intervals, because then they not only have to deal with the discomfort of the situation, but they'll also be constantly filled with anxiety, anticipating when the next drop would fall onto their forehead. Their thoughts constantly interrupted by the never-ending dripping. I honestly don't doubt the effectiveness of this torture, because in my house, we have a leaky faucet that we've still not fixed. And sometimes on a quiet day, I'd just be trying to chill in the living room, googling different ways to kill and torture fellow human beings, as one does. But the sound gets so distracting. I'm ready to tear off my goddamn hair at this point. Fun fact, this didn't actually originate from China. In fact, its invention is credited to an Italian lawyer whose name I cannot pronounce. And adding Chinese to the name of the technique was purely to give it a sense of ominous mystery. I don't know how Chinese equals ominous, but oh well. As a bonus round, I'll quickly go through a couple of popular instruments of torture. beginning with the pair of anguish, which may or may not have even been a torture device in the first place, or some have speculated it was inserted into a person's bout, kitty, or back door, and then expanded to rip open the victim from the inside out. Others have suggested it was likely used to make fruit juice. I, however, believe this mofo was actually going into people's back doors, but for reasons other than torture. Reasons that I clearly don't know because I'm a child of God that reads my Bible every night, okay? Shut up. Next is the Spanish donkey, which was a triangular wooden device on 4 legs with a sharp edge pointing up. If you were unlucky enough to be sent to the Spanish donkey, then you'd be made to sit on it with 1 leg on either side, and depending on how much they wanted you to suffer that day, they could also tie weights to your feet and add little spikes to the top of the donkey so it would dig into your bleeding butts even more. Eventually, the stress of the weights pulling on your body could get strong enough to literally tear you in half. That's a big ouch there, buddy. Then we have the whirly gig. This was more or less a suspended cage that you'd throw someone into and spin really fast. And if they were lucky, they'd come out with only like a bajillion broken bones and their half-digested breakfast spewed onto the floor. So basically, this contraption was an action-packed ride. Last but not the least is the breast ripper. Feel free to use your imaginations for that one. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching and see you again next time.